Hello and welcome back to Debate Clash. This is part 2 of the video addressing the public forum resolution for March of 2017. If you haven't seen part 1, make sure you look at it. There's a great overview of the topic as a whole, and it also goes over the affirmative arguments. Now, before we get into this, we also wanted to remind everyone, please contribute and help us out by reminding your debate coach that they can purchase evidence through our shop at debateclash.com/market. And also be sure to use our Debate Clash research engine, which we also mentioned in part 1 of this video. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the topic.
Exactly. So, as always, we're going to have 3 categories here that we're going to go over. The first one is going to be that U.S. pressure will work. The second one is going to be the two-state solution will be beneficial. And lastly, we're going to have workarounds like we always do, just to bring up some frameworks or some things that may come up in the round that you'll want to take note of. So going on to this first section here, that the U.S. pressure will work. Our first point we wanted to bring up here is that U.S. pressure has led Israel to make bolder moves, and these moves push Palestine into a position where they're more willing to negotiate a solution and more willing to agree on a solution with Israel.
Absolutely. When you're weaker, you're more willing to negotiate over different land, allowing the two-state system to function. The next argument that you can make under this category that the United States pressure will work is that it has been working, especially if you look towards the progress that Obama and John Kerry have made in the past 8 years. You can really see they've made monumental leaps and bounds with this Israel-Palestine conflict. So research those, grab some evidence as to why relations are improving, why they'd be more willing to work together, and then you can argue that if, as long as we maintain this pressure, or support as you could call it, that you can say that this two-party system will be pushed through.
Exactly. Now on to our next point here. So I just wanted to say one thing here, and then I'll really hit on what the point is. So the affirmative has the ability to say that they can stop putting pressure on Israel at any point in the future. Make sure that you don't let them do that. To make the round fair, they have to say that we should stop putting pressure on Israel right now. Now, that being said, the U.S. has a lot of political and economic influence with Israel. We have been, and we can continue to use that to put pressure on them. Now, this isn't the solution between the problem of Israel and Palestine is not an easy solution, and it's not something that's just going to pop up out of nowhere. We've been working towards it for an extremely long time, and just because it's not working right at this moment does not mean that it's not going to work in the future. Part of building this solution is that slow increase, making sure we have a solid foundation of common ground between the two sides to really come to a solution that's going to last and be permanent. What the AF is advocating is that we should not take this long, slow building solution that we've been working towards, and instead have something that's quick and, oh yeah, solution right now. It's not going to be permanent. Even if there is a solution, it won't be permanent because it's not built on anything that's meaningful that has been building up between the two nations.
Absolutely, and this temporary versus permanent solution thing is really big. I would definitely recommend looking into this more. The next argument under this category is that the United States is pointing Israel in the right direction. Regardless of the outcome of the events, the United States is still doing something that the global community wants, that's good for the global community, that's good for the United States, and ultimately is good for Israel and Palestine. So what you can argue is that regardless of the outcome, we are making the right decision, we are gaining hegemony, we are gaining an ally, and we are advocating for a solution. We are saying, you guys need to start working together, you guys need to start getting along, and we're here to encourage it and grow it.
Yeah, so moving on to our last point under this section here. So the U.S. has really deep political and economic ties with Israel. What this allows us is the influence with Israel to put this pressure on them without really any cost to us. No matter what pressure we're putting on them, we're going to have this influence both economically and politically. So really all we're doing is leveraging influence we already have. Now, if we were to try and implement something else, like the AF is proposing, then we could see a cost develop there that that's going to be put on us too.
Absolutely, and any other alternative would be costly is the big thing. And so once you've kind of looked at this whole category and proved in the round that U.S. pressure will work to push a two-state system through, you can move on to our next category, which is that the two-state solution is beneficial to Israel, to the United States, and to the world. Now, the first argument that you can make under this category is that conflict will decrease under this two-state solution. If you look at the Israel-Palestine conflict, they're fighting over territory and they're fighting over land. Once a two-state system is established, Israel is going to have its space, Palestine is going to have its space, and they can finally stop arguing over whose territory is who. Essentially, there's a big military, almost a war that's been going on between these two, and as soon as this territory is established and they have a mediator provide the land for who gets what, this war can finally end, lives can be saved, and money can stop being spent on this.
Exactly. Our next point we wanted to bring up under the benefits of the two-state solution is that Palestine can begin to rebuild their nation from this long conflict that they've been in. So as it currently stands, Palestine does have its own form of government, but it is dictated somewhat by Israel. So what this two-state system would allow is to give them the freedom to establish their own government, to have their own rules and regulations and laws. I mean, really, as an American, that's why America was established in the first place, was to get out from under the thumb of England, and so that we can have our freedom to make our own decisions, to have our own future. What this two-state system allows is Palestine to have its own future, to have its own rights, and just dictate its own future, I think is the really important part.
Absolutely. And because of this ideology that's been happening, this conflicting ideology, they have not been able to get along for so long that one of the primary benefits that arises is that their hatred might end. They might actually be able to start working with each other, because just like Michael said, right now they're forced to kind of work with each other. Whereas if they're two separate countries, they can make their own decisions, which means that there's less hatred, there's less gridlock in that political system that exists. It's just like if you had two employees that they were great employees, but they just could not work together. And after 5 years, what you would probably do is separate them. You would say employee A go over here, employee B go over here, and they could do great work on their own, making their own decisions, and finally respect each other. Not work with each other necessarily, but finally respect each other.
Exactly. Now moving on to this last point that we wanted to bring up for benefits of the two-state solution is the economic impacts. Currently, Palestine is extremely dependent on Israel. They have to bring pretty much all of their economic goods through Israel to get to Palestine. What this two-state system would allow is allow them, again, to create their own rules, regulation, and economic freedom from Israel. And this is it's a big deal because as it currently stands, Palestine does have a lot of restrictions and regulations on them as far as their economy goes that doesn't allow them to really be that rich. They're pretty poor, pretty poverty-stricken people. And so this economic freedom would really help them to have higher quality of lives.
Absolutely. And when we look at the resolution one more time, we see that it is very hard for the negative to win based on just the wording of the resolution. Just like we showed with our first two categories, the neg kind of by default has to show that the United States pressure will work, and then that the two-party system is good, which is a really hard burden on the negative. So our third category is going to go over the workarounds to hopefully help you get an advantage with this topic and give the neg a chance.
Exactly. So I know I mentioned this earlier. One thing that you do have to note under this resolution is that it doesn't give any time frame for when we have to when the pressure has to stop being put on Israel. Make sure that you don't let the affirmative say, in 6 months we should stop putting pressure on them, in 12 months we should stop putting pressure on them. In order to keep the round fair, you really have to say that it has to be right now that the pressure is stopped. Otherwise, it just makes the round completely biased towards the affirmative if they can pick any arbitrary period of time.
Absolutely. That's right now. Now, the next thing that you can argue with a framework is that you can say that based on the two biggest opinions that exist to resolve this Israel-Palestine conflict, there is going to be a one-state system or a two-state system. And what you can do is you can say that the affirmative has to advocate for that one-state system because it is the only alternative to the two-state system. And from there, you can take it and say the one-state system is terrible because, like Michael said, now you have the Palestinians, which are the minority, not being able to do anything. They're going to have zero influence in the government, and they're basically going to be oppressed for the rest of eternity until all of this is over. And then on the other side, if they had equal representation in the government, and it functioned somewhat similar to ours, there'd be a lot of gridlock, there'd be more polarization over there than there is in the United States, which is hard to believe. But essentially, you can attack this one-state system and say that the affirmative has to defend it because it is the alternative to the two-state system.
Exactly. Now, one thing that we wanted to bring up also with the wording of the resolution, so with it saying that the United States should no longer put pressure on Israel, what you can bring up as the negative, to really, if they're saying that, oh, what we're doing now isn't working, you could say, oh, you're right, we need to put more pressure on them. We need to do more to reach this solution. So don't let them push you into saying that, oh, it's not working right now. There's a lot of ways we can take this. Like we said before, it's going to take a long time to build up this solution. Or you could say, you're right, we should push harder for it. We're not doing enough. So we just wanted to make note of that.
Absolutely. And then if you wanted to take this round from an entirely opposing strategic point, what you could do on the negative is say that the affirmative has to show an alternative, and that alternative has to be better than the two-party system. And the reason why you would even take this strategy up in the first place is that you could say that Israel and Palestine are either very close to making progress to each other, and that anything else, that if a wrench gets thrown into that cog, we start all over. 100 years of progress is now just thrown out the door. So you can say that they are very, very close right now. They're growing, they're doing better, and anything that we do that is not the status quo is going to disrupt this. And so it's a defensive stance to take, but if you want to take it, it's great.
So the last point we wanted to bring up here is a framework that would take the pressure off of the negative and put it back onto the affirmative, so that they have to actually be proving something instead of just saying, oh, the neg doesn't show this, the neg doesn't show this. You can say, well, the app doesn't show this. So because of the wording of the resolution, you can state that the affirmative has to show that no longer putting pressure on Israel would benefit the United States. The way the resolution is worded, it says the United States should no longer put pressure on Israel, the United States being the actor there. Therefore, there has to be some benefit associated with the United States.
Exactly. Because the United States is doing the action, any and all benefits should be based on the United States.
Exactly.
Anyways, so thank you guys so much for watching our video. If you're still struggling with the topic, be sure to visit the Debate Clash Marketplace at debateclash.com/market. Pretty easy to remember. If you need help researching and you don't want that evidence briefs, please go to debateclash.com/debateclashresearchengine.html. We'll also put a link in the description below. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like us, all of that fun jazz, and good luck in March.